Time to check in with the big picture for a little deeper dig into today's speech from the throne. Goldie Hyder is the Senior Vice President at Hill & Knowlton Strategies. Bill Robson, President and CEO of the C.D. Howe Institute. And Erin Weir, an economist with United Steelworkers. Great to have all of you here. I want to start with actually a question to all of you, which is, did anything jump out? Did anything kind of stand out in this document, which is, as they are, can be full of kind of vague, nice platitudes? Erin, I'll start with you, but what jumped out?
Well, I was caught off guard by this commitment to legislate the polluter pay principle, because when the opposition parties talk about that, the Conservative government kind of characterizes it as a carbon tax on everything.
Right.
And here you have the government adopting that idea. So I think it's a good principle, but I'm very curious to see how it's enacted.
And Bill, do you want to pick that up? What do you think is most important or interesting in this speech from the throne?
It wasn't anything very surprising. It was the very strong focus on economic issues. I don't know exactly the timing, but it seemed like about half the speech, and certainly the front end headlines, were on the economic record and building on that. Nothing very surprising. I was very pleased to hear, and we had other confirmations of that the trade deal with Europe is going to happen. So really not surprising. That's seen as a strength. Economically, a lot of what they said made sense. I don't know about the supply management side. Politically, clearly that makes sense as well for this government to emphasize that and stay on that theme.
And Goldie?
Well, the EU trade deal is helpful, and anything else that's to follow, whether it's Keystone or any one of the number of free trade deals out there, is exactly the kind of thing that they don't have control over, but as it comes, they can start taking credit for the economic management that they've been doing over the course of the last 6-7 years.
And for the Europe trade deal, especially on the agricultural protectionism side, letting in more cheese, shocking though it might seem, they do need some support from the provinces on that. So the timing's not bad in the sense that they've now kind of run that up the flagpole very significantly in the speech from the throne, and just puts a bit more pressure on the premiers that need to come into line for that to work.
80,000 jobs, Erin, is what the claim is that will be created through this free trade deal. We know that the dollars are big, and a lot of people think that it's a great thing that it happened. Do you think it's a great thing?
Well, I think that 80,000 jobs claim is highly questionable because, of course, what the government does is it takes a model that assumes full employment in order to project this increase in gross domestic product, and then they take that number and try to translate it back into jobs, but of course their starting point was that everyone was employed to begin with. So I don't really buy that number. I guess what I would notice is that last week Statistics Canada issued new merchandise trade figures, and so far this year, from January to August, Canada's running a trade deficit of about $14 billion with the European Union, so about $2 billion per month. That's about twice as big a deficit as we were running in either 2012 or 2011. And my concern is if we just liberalize things and amplify those existing export and import flows, what it will mean is a bigger trade deficit and a bigger drag on Canada's economy.
Bill, I feel like you might have something to say about that.
Well, the free trade arguments, I mean, we heard it all back with the Canada-U.S. free trade deal, and Erin, I don't mean any disrespect, but you and your side were predicting all these disasters, none of which came true. It's very important for us to do this deal, not simply for its own sake, but because there are a lot of other opportunities out there in the world, and Canada's getting a bit of a reputation abroad and even here at home as a country that sort of comes to the table and can never get it done. And I think it's going to be very significant economically in its own right, this deal, but also for the signal it sends that we can actually come and deliver and make a deal.
But to be fair about it, I wouldn't say it's a panacea either, right? I mean, you're talking about a part of the world that actually has slow economic growth, as does our part of the world right now. The real opportunities are in Asia, and I think that's where Minister Fast and Prime Minister Harper are going to put their attention. And the Governor General's back to China, as we know. In fact, any second now, I believe he's leaving to China to keep that side of the relationship that is critical to Canada's economic development going. And that means access to markets becomes the local issue, which I expect you're going to continue to hear more and more about.
Bill, I know that you support free trade and you believe that it will lead to economic growth through higher productivity, but do you at least concede that this 80,000 jobs figure is bogus?
Well, those numbers are suspect for another reason as well, which is that they're static. In fact, the government told the modelers not to do any dynamic effects here, and we know that the spur to competition and the spur to quality is also very important. So I wouldn't subscribe to that number, but whenever people ask me about the effects of these things, I go back to, remember Canadian wine before free trade? It was terrible, it was undrinkable, and we thought we could never be competitive. And now we produce some of the best wines in the world, and I'm confident that more liberalization, including in cheese, can do do the same thing for us.
Well, Bill, but we got to move on to the stuff business doesn't expect from this government, and that is the interventionist behavior that we're seeing. They're going to lower roaming rates. They're going to insist on transparency on credit card fees. They're going to make books priced the same, I guess, in U.S. and Canadian dollars. Bill, what is with all of this kind of very granular looking into how businesses operate?
I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to make it a threefer on the balanced budget legislation, but on that stuff, I think I share the view of a lot of people that they're clearly seeing that these are pocketbook issues. The bedside manner of the telecom companies isn't that great a lot of the time, and so there's animosity, and the government's onto something there. But when they talk about that type of thing in the same speech where they also talk about defending supply management, you have to wonder how coherent that philosophy is. There are a lot of things that the government is doing that are holding retail prices up, including supporting the dairy cartel, that really ought not to be there. So clearly it's poll-driven. They're sensing a lot of popular dissatisfaction. You got to watch out for unintended consequences in these areas. I'm all for more competition, but the more the government gets into sort of regulating the prices and specifying what the contracts need to look like, the more you kind of freeze yourself in time, and 5 years later you look back and you wish you hadn't done it.
Gold, do you want a quick word on that?
Well, a good point is all I'll say to that. I think that this is yet another indication, though, of a government that tried to find a way to help consumers without doing what traditional throne speeches do, right? I mean, you look back at the Martin throne speech, it was like $4 billion for this and $2 billion for that and $1 billion for this. They said no new spending, and that will appeal to the base that I'm talking about, because what this document really is a halftime indication of what the government has been doing and what it intends to do to be successful in its 2015 election campaign.
Aaron, last thought to you.
So I agree with Bill that a lot of this might be motivated by pocketbook politics, but I also think there are good public policy reasons to regulate natural monopoly-type industries like telecommunications and cable TV.
Wouldn't it be better to change the policies to create more competition and let them run their businesses themselves?
Well, the only way you get competition is by artificially creating these markets via regulation. I mean, another approach is to run these industries as crown corporations, which seems to work in Saskatchewan.
Right when we're out of time. Okay,
Tell them we're out of time, Amanda.
We do have
a natural monopoly.
Great to have all of you. Erin Weir, Goldie Hyder, Bill Robson.